Well, welcome to another edition of the Learning Journey podcast. Wayne Heinsohn, your host, with you once again. And this episode, we head off to the UK to catch up with Peter Fryatt, who I think has been part of the MAF family for quite some time, but I'll let Peter tell his story. First of all, let's welcome him. Hey, Peter, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
For those that don't know, and I know that there are some people in the organisation that know you quite well, but tell us about your journey into MAF.
So I've been around MAF since I was 15 as part of the youth department back in the mid-90s. I'm showing my age, there you go. And I was taken along to a 50th year anniversary celebration at Biggin Hill in South London when I was 14, 15 by my dad. And it really struck me that, wow, it can use aircraft and share the gospel. The two just suddenly gelled, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I really believe God put a little seed in my heart just there and then as I was walking around the aircraft, talking to one of the pilots, and he was really passionate about what we do. I just thought, wow, this is amazing. So I joined the youth department then, had the privilege of going out to Ethiopia for a couple of weeks on one of the first youth missions, as it were. To Ethiopia for a couple of weeks. That was good fun. That really sort of gelled my love and passion and sort of my hope that I would one day go to the mission field, as we say, quickly realizing actually over a number of years that our mission field is also at home. But way back in the mid-90s, that was my introduction to MAF.
Yeah. Hey, I wonder if we just take a bit of a side tangent from your journey, but I wonder if you could maybe speak to like a parent of a teenager who's listening to the podcast right now. I've got a 19-year-old and we've sort of done the journey with him in terms of, well, what does adult life look like for you and how do you serve God in amongst that? So, you mentioned 14, 15, the seed was planted in terms of MAF. So can you speak to maybe parents that have got a 12, 13, 14-year-old and they're trying to figure out life and what does it look like when they're grown up? Speak into that from what you've learnt from your experience in terms of how do we direct our kids to be missional, whether that's at home, whether that's, in a far-flung nation somewhere else.
Yeah, what a great question, Wayne. That's something I'm looking with my daughter. She's 16, interestingly. Not that she's going to go off and join MF or anything, but she's looking at university and where to go. And I think we've come into a culture, or I find myself in a culture where we put a lot of cotton wool around our children, and that's good. Obviously, one of our jobs as parents is to protect our children, but there needs to be a bit of a kicking out of the nest at some point, even from a fairly young age. So maybe 14, 15 is appropriate these days, but giving opportunity. I was given very good opportunities by my parents just to go off and explore under the knowledge that, it was within a big organization. And again, for the example of going out to Ethiopia, my experience is that, certainly speaking for my daughter, she's a lot more mature than I give her credit for.
Yes.
And she's she gets a lot of input at school. Some of it is not so good, but some of it is really good. And they've got a real sense of self and she certainly has a self-confidence that she could actually go and travel. And one of her desires is to go and travel the world. She's a photographer and she wants to go and photograph the world, which I think is awesome. And I really want to encourage that. But to a family looking, with a young person at the future and life in general, I think the temptation is to go, oh, well, maybe one day, or you can dream that and you can do that and you can achieve that if you do this, this and this. Well, what about actually giving them an opportunity? And, with a mission organization, perhaps is probably one of the safest places to start, I would say. And just let God start sowing seeds in your heart, particularly for that young person. Find out what you're passionate about and look for ways to explore that.
Yeah. Now, I think I'm correct in that your current title, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Manager of Technical Training and Innovation. Is that still the title, or have you changed?
That is still the title. Yeah, it's changed a few times.
Yeah. So what does that actually mean? Because obviously training is a big component of what you do at MAF, and we wanted to get you on the podcast because I know that you've got a lot of wisdom from the years that you've spent investing into people coming into the MAF family.
So my job at the moment is kind of split into three sort of areas. The first one is to help set up apprenticeship schemes with our resourcing groups, and also looking at pathways for our local program staff to achieve a license. Maybe they've been working in stores, or maybe they've been working in another area within the program, but God's put in their heart that they actually want to become an engineer. So looking at pathways on how that happens as well. So the apprenticeships is sort of the main thing, or one of the main things. I also look after, again, as I say, I work with Keith developing, he does the developing, but working with him to look at how we train our engineers who are licensed engineers and do recurrent training and keep them fresh, as it were, and compliant. And then, this innovation thing is quite new for me. The last few months or so, I've been sort of thrashing out what innovation actually looks like from not just a training context, but also in the wider technical operations. Started to link up with the strategic development team now as well. We're just thinking how we're going to do this together. Yeah, which is really exciting.
Is there, in terms of that innovation, is there a component of unlearning? Because we learn things across
really
life,
is.
and sometimes we've got to go, well, that no longer fits the context that we find ourselves in, and so we do need to unlearn some stuff.
Absolutely right. Yeah, there's a few cultural things I've come across, but I've been in MAF now 3.5, nearly 4 years in the role that I'm in, and it's a lot of cultural aspects, as you would imagine, with such a variety of different countries that we work in, different cultures, which is I find it absolutely fascinating. Come across new things all the time, which kind of drives me. And I was listening to a previous podcast and we were talking about not being able to ask for help or the culture of just saying, it's okay, I'll just sort of carry on and it'll be fine type of thing. And not actually asking while someone is training on the job, trying to encourage that culture of, hey, I'm not actually trying to do this. And every day I do that. I'm not sure I'm going to do this. Start on Google. No, not Google, but there's some brilliant people in the organisation to talk to.
Talk to us about the apprentices as they come in. So they're engineering apprentices. So they're primarily going from one role to training for a different role. What does that look like? I'm guessing that there's not a standard, that it looks like, but just overall, sort of how does that process work?
Generally speaking, from our resourcing group, our candidates have had some sort of technical background. They've been fixing their motorbikes in their spare time, or they've played with Lego, even as basic as that, or Meccano or something, as a kid. And they come with this general idea of, I just know how to put that together, or I know how to take that apart. Whereas the big challenge I find is that from our programs, our local staff, sometimes, not always, that's a big generalization, but most of the time, they haven't had those opportunities. Again, it's about opportunities to learn and play and, learn as you play with these things like Lego and Meccano and our Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. And some people be sitting there going, what on earth is he talking about? But there's little things as we play with kids we just take for granted. That's not the case always in there. So it's making that transition and trying to make sure that, yes, it's about investment in people, but it's also about actually personally developing that person and getting them to think, not just a technical way, but, how do they learn in general? And it's been very interesting for me as an instructor. I was an instructor before in the RAF, and the learning styles are quite different. So let's take the UK, for example, quite theoretical, quite academic, generally speaking. Whereas in somewhere like, I know we don't have a program there, but in Colombia, for example, in the Latino culture, it's very oral. And that does translate into Africa as well sometimes. It's a very oral storytelling culture. And so for somebody to learn, you can sit there in a classroom and go, right, it's this and that's that. And, this is how that works. And you take this apart. Whereas somewhere else, not the UK, you have to tell a story and you have to be able to present it in a story form and you have to involve them. And, it's very face-to-face, very one-to-one, very practical. So it's interesting in the different learning styles. So that's one of the challenges and one of the opportunities as well for us as an organisation to develop the way that we learn and also teach.
So how did you learn the necessity for that different training style? Was that like trial and error for you? Was it you kind of, you went in with this British method, to a different country and it just fell flat and you were like, what's happening here?
Wow. Complete disaster. I'll actually share a story pre-MAF, if I may. I was as a civilian, I'd gone back as a civilian to teach Air Force apprentices on fuel systems and the Tornado aircraft. And I was teaching what we called the Brit courses, so the traditional RAF apprentices coming through. And we also taught the Saudi Air Force as well. Right. And the two worlds were so different. So in a so-called Brit course, I would teach to the whole class and I'd say, right, boys, this is, girls, this is it, this is this, quite in a fairly academic way. And then we'd go down to the hangar and practice it and it all seemed to work okay. With the Saudis, again, very intelligent people, very, very intelligent. But the teaching style was totally different. I had to teach to one person in the classroom, the senior person in the class, the perceived senior person in the classroom. So I would teach to this person, him, and then he would teach it to the rest of the class. And I would stand at the front of the classroom, teaching away. This is this. Right, let's go to the hangar and teach it. But he would say, and the senior man would put his hand up. Oh, what's going on? He said, oh, I'm just going to talk to the boys for a bit. Oh, okay, interesting. And he would spend another half an hour teaching. And I'm like, what? What is going on? So anyway, that was a bit of and there were some of the things that I would teach that just fell completely flat. Even some of the jokes that I would throw in just fell completely flat. And I thought, right, okay, a different approach is needed.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned earlier about technical aptitude, and how important that is. I want to ask though, where does passion fit on the scale when it comes to being able to train someone or for someone learning? Because I just know, not necessarily in aviation, but say like in sports, for example, there are many sports people in various fields that say, look, I'm not the most naturally gifted, but I'm passionate about this particular sport. And so they almost rise to a level that's beyond their ability because of passion. So I just wonder if, how that fits in maybe in MAF from your experience.
That's a really good point, Wayne. I think passion is really important aspect of learning as well, because yes, you can be less technically adept or have a lesser knowledge of aircraft, let's say, for example. But I love the analogy used with sport because, yes, passion can push you through. And I've seen it many times, actually, as I've been training young people, specifically in aircraft engineering, where they come in from a non-technical background, let's say, and they've come through and they really struggle, whether it's academic or whether it's with the hands, struggling with the hand skills side of things, the manual dexterity. The passion drives them through, and it's really interesting to watch, actually. They really want to get to the end of their course. They really want to get to a particular point in their career, let's say, and it motivates them. It acts as a motivator, and actually, in a few cases I've seen, they will spend extra time because they're passionate. They will spend extra time trying to perfect that particular competency or that particular skill, or finding out that particular knowledge and trying to memorize it for an exam or whatever. That passion will actually drive them through. And those who don't have the same level of passion, or, they're passionate about other things, they don't actually make it. They might be really, really bright. They might have had university degrees or whatever. But if they're not as passionate and they're not as engaged with their vision of where they want to go, then often they will not necessarily fall off the scale, but they won't quite do as well.
Yeah. I just want to expand on that a bit, because the Learning Journey podcast is part of the Learning and Development Department here at MAF. And so, we really want to equip people with whatever tools that they need. But I'm wondering, for maybe, the engineering trainee or apprentice that's coming in, and all they want to do is they just want to get on the tools. It's like, I don't need to worry about all this other stuff. I don't need to worry about that online learning or this or that. Just give me a spanner, give me an engine, and let me go to it. How do you pull that person back and for them to understand there's a holistic thing when it comes to learning? And part of that, not all of that, only part of that is that practical component.
It's so important. Yes, you might have the passion, but let's get some skills in there as well. So I've been recently working on a competency framework, technical competency framework, that lists out the real basic core competencies that we would expect an engineer to have at various levels. So from the apprentice entry level right the way through to head of maintenance, or a chief engineer in old language. And it's grouped into three areas. So the first area is safety, then the second area is quality, and then the third area is consistency.
Tell us how you feel when a student that you've been training finishes, graduates, advances to the next level, whatever it might be. Like, what is that from your perspective as a trainer? Like, how does that make you feel?
There's nothing like it. There really isn't. Again, I was listening to one of the previous podcasts. It's like this eureka moment. It's like, yes, I've done the job. Well done. Move on. Let's go to the next course or whatever. No, it's a real. I love watching people develop. I really love watching people develop from a particular point in their career, their knowledge, their skills, whatever it is. and they themselves develop themselves. You know, I always consider myself as a facilitator, never an instructor or teacher. I'm facilitating their learning, and it's up to them. You know, it's up to all of us to learn and absorb information and work on our skills. And I just love watching that process. Yeah, you can put some input into there. You can put some framework around it and show them, go off and do this and try it this way. Oh, if you can't quite do this, try this way. And they do it. And you're like, yes. So I get a lot of satisfaction from that. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, I wonder if you could speak to, I don't know, let's say there's a manager in South Sudan or Liberia or Madagascar, and they're listening to the podcast today, and they're really not struggling, but, you know, they're sort of in that place of, is what I'm doing really, you know, making a difference? You know, I think we all have those questions, you know, from time to time, but I wonder if you could just sort of speak into them in terms of the role that they're playing, investing into MAF family who are going into a different role, because obviously, you know, you've had some experience on that in terms of your role at MAF.
That's a really good question. I think, in fact, we were actually having a conversation in our tech ops team about feeling not a little bit small, but sometimes the work that we do isn't always at the highest priority, and the things that we produce aren't always read all of the time. You know, manuals and competency frameworks and all this sort of stuff, and you spend so much time and effort producing this stuff to then issue it, and then you don't really get any feedback, or you know, you're kind of at a point where you're thinking, wow, what's the point? The conclusion that I came to from that conversation was that we are all part of the same body, the body of Christ. And I don't mean that in a glib way. I mean that in a really real, you know, every single part that we do, every role that we have within MAF is a cog, and we're all working together. And if one of those cogs doesn't work or it falls out, the whole thing will eventually at some point stop. If I don't produce the competency manual or whatever it is, or one of our other guys doesn't produce a particular manual, we're not going to stop flying straight away. Of course not. But eventually it will happen. So I would really encourage anyone feeling like that, you know, we are part of the same body. We are working together. Yes, sometimes it's a bit of a slog. Sometimes it's really hard work, and sometimes it's difficult to see where we fit in with such a big international organization every single day. But we have to just keep this thing, you know, again, we come back to our vision and our mission. You know, I have to keep that in front of me. I'm just looking at it now. I can see it on my whiteboard, and it's important just to ground myself sometimes and go, I am absolutely here, and I know I've been called here by God to do this job. In the future, the job might change in MAF, but for now, He has called me to do this particular thing.
Now, Peter Fryatt, it has been fantastic to chat to you and have you on the Learning Journey podcast. Really, really appreciate your time. Last question, and this is specifically for managers or maybe for those in the ELT or OLT. How do you continue to learn? Because you've got a very busy schedule. A lot of people within MAF have got a very busy schedule. But from the L&D point of view, we want to encourage everybody to continue learning, and that can look different for different people depending on where they are and what their role is. But from your experience across the years, how have you continued to learn, to upskill, to grow professionally, personally, all those kind of things?
There's two things I've got. So there's the planned spontaneity. So this is something I developed a while ago. On a Saturday, for example, I have the kids maybe, and I know that I just need an hour just to go and explore something, as in go for a walk, maybe across the nature reserve here, or just sit on YouTube and watch, you know, I don't know, watch some engineering thing or something. I don't know, whatever it is. Again, that's the idea of spontaneity. I don't actually know what I'm going to do for that hour, but I know I need an hour just away from the usual run of the mill life. So I know that I can plan that hour I've got from, 10 to 11 in the morning just to go off and do something. That was the first thing. Second one is be interested in lots and lots of different things. So, for example, I've worked in a lot of different industries, and actually I can see already there are certain elements of those technologies or ways of doing things from different industries that I can bring into the work that I do now. But not just that, but be interested in technologies as well. So I've had control systems, software development, aircraft engineering, galleys and structures, aircraft structures, single-handed keyboards, all sorts of different technologies and different things. And you just think, if you're thinking about a problem, you can often draw on those experiences and go, oh, that's how they used to do it there. I wonder if I can do this and change that. Oh, look, again, it's the whole idea, the Lego thing in my head, I could put that together. So yeah, being interested in lots of different things, again, within that planned spontaneity, can be really helpful.
Yeah. I love what our CEO, Dave Fryatt, said recently on one episode of the podcast. He said, I try to learn one new thing every day. And I think that really speaks to having a deliberate mindset when it comes to learning.
Yes.
That all around you, there are opportunities to learn. There's structured learning, yes, whether that's on Elevate or in a training course or whatever it might be. But as you've just touched on, all around us, we're learning constantly if we're open to that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's about the openness, yeah.
It was such a pleasure to chat with Peter Fryatt, our guest on the learning journey today. Peter's been busy and working hard with the engineering trainees to fill one of the current gaps at MAF. And when it comes to filling gaps in your learning, did you know you can access Right Now Media completely free of charge? There's more than 20,000 resources available for you, things like videos and study guides that will help you grow and develop both personally and professionally. If you want to get access to Right Now Media, email us, learning.development@mafint.org. And indeed, if you've got a story you'd love to share on the learning journey, you can also let us know via that email address, learning.development@mafint.org. Thanks so much for your company for this episode of The Learning Journey. We look forward to doing it all again in a couple of weeks' time as we head off to Africa.